What is going on, gunfighters? I'm excited about today's episode because I consider myself a servant. I'm here to serve. And two of the patrons reached out in very similar questions and inquired on how to best set up a fighting rifle, a fighting carbine. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm excited about that. So welcome, and hopefully welcome back to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values and real-world first-hand experience. I'm going to plug in the bio, and then we'll get into the main topic. So, who am I? Who is this person talking to you from across the internet? Why should you listen? First and foremost, I am a Christian, a servant of God, and a follower of Jesus Christ. God has blessed me to do many things in my life, for I could do nothing apart from Him. U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran, did a couple of tours in Iraq. As an assaultman after my combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. Also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also did several years in law enforcement, LAPD. I worked regular assignments and more specialized assignments. Been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency. That's all I'll say about that. Been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion. And West Coast Regional Rifle Champion. Won more shooting competitions with the talent that God's given me than I can actually remember. Was blessed to be the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. Our primary job, the reason we primarily existed, was to stop active shooters. I got the opportunity to head up and be the commander of that team. I grew up around guns, hunting and shooting and competing at a very early age. Been blessed to hunt all over this beautiful country, from whitetail on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast, and bear and elk and all manner of things. I've even been a professional big game hunter and guide. But again, most importantly, I'm a Christian. And I am your host, Michael Milito. Welcome to the podcast. Fighting rifles. As you might deduce from the bio, by God's grace, He's gotten me through many a situation. I've been a professional gunfighter most of my adult life. Now I'm trying to serve and share that knowledge with you. So, if I can serve, I should, I think. So, let me give you a little bit of pontification on fighting rifles and carbines. And I would say, first of all, ask why. What is this rifle doing for me? The goal for this rifle to look the coolest it can on Instagram with all the coolest matching S.C.A.R coded parts and this thing and that thing? Is it a fun novelty for the range? Is it a tool to protect? A tool to help love your neighbor as yourself? And that should be the answer, right? Jesus told His disciples to carry swords. What are swords used for? They're a weapon. One of the patrons, this came up in an insider chat, and was asking about different optics and stuff and how to configure his rifle. And I asked him, is it a fighting rifle? Is it a fighting gun? And he pretty much responded with, I don't remember the exact words, but yeah, everything I own is set up like that. And that's a great attitude to have. I don't share that attitude. I do have some guns. I'm not a gun collector, but I have some guns just for training. Like, they make me more capable of sharpening and honing and mastering some skills. For instance, I have a Thompson Center Contender, single shot, break open 22. A horrible choice for pretty much any kind of defensive use. But it's great when I go out to the range and I want to master the fundamentals of handgun shooting with iron sights. It's a good foundation. It's a good foundation builder. But I get where he's going with that, and that's a great attitude to have. So let me start by telling you that I think if you're going to be well-rounded you ought to be a man familiar with iron sights, with running and making hits with iron sights. Good, precise hits. I'm not talking about shooting a cardboard silhouette at 7 yards with an M4 clone. I'm talking about really good rifleman skills. Being able to use iron sights to make hits on man-sized targets and much smaller at hundreds of yards. Standing, kneeling, I would say sitting, but a lot of places have taken that out, and prone. With iron sights. I think that you should know how and be acquainted with iron sights. Call me a troglodyte. I know it's 2023. There's all kinds of computers and whiz-bang stuff, but I'm all about using that stuff and being the most effective gunfighter that you can be. But I'm also for knowing how to drive a manual transmission, knowing how to tie a knot and bait a hook, and butcher an animal from standing on all fours to meat on the table. Those kind of skills. And I think shooting a weapon with iron sights is absolutely one of those skills. I'm not even saying it should be your primary go-to on a fighting rifle, because I'm all about taking advantage of whatever I can take advantage of. I recently got into this with a patron that I greatly respect. But we're talking about competitions, and like all competition shooting, which I love, is kind of a sport. None of it is actually the same as actual gunfighting. It's still beneficial. Much like there's different kinds of martial arts, and they all differ from actual street fighting. But let's say MMA is closer than Tai Bo, right? Or than a lot of the other Eastern things with all kinds of fancy kicks and punches and stuff like that. Have rules on how you can hit and can't hit and things like that. And even MMA has a lot of rules compared to a street fight, which pretty much has stay alive as your prime directive, right? There's no cage, there's no tapping out, in a street fight. But I get where they're going, and it's a good discipline. Again, nothing's going to be the same, nothing's going to be perfect. Going back to guns and gunfighting, if red dots help me get fast, accurate hits on target, I'm all about it, right? But there's more complexity. Look at it this way. It is absolutely faster to cut down a tree with a chainsaw. And that's not something I mentioned in the bio, but I do have a little bit of work as a, let's say, lumberjack. Now, some people have a lot more experience in that than me, but I've done it on the side between jobs. Now, a chainsaw, there is no doubt, is way faster, more efficient at cutting down a tree. It's also many, many times more complex than an axe. There's a lot more things that can go wrong, and there's a lot more infrastructure needed for a chainsaw. You need oil, you need gasoline, you need spark plugs, you need tensioners. An axe also takes skill, different kind of skill, but it's a simpler weapon. An axes break, and iron sights break. But if I break my axe, I can pretty much take the head and make another handle and fix it, and it'll stay running pretty much to infinity, right? I could find it. I could take the axe that Abraham Lincoln used. If I could find that axe head, the handle was bad, I could make a new handle for it, and I could go down and chop down a tree right now. A brand new Husqvarna chainsaw in the store today. If the world collapses, or if things stay as they are, in 150, 200 years, if you stored that thing in a garage, you're going to be able to take that out and run it and cut down a tree in 200 years. But I bet 200 years from now, you'll still be able to, if you could find Abraham Lincoln's axe, go chop down a tree with it for the rest of your life and hand it down to your kids and his kids and his kids' kids. And I kind of liken that to iron sights. Again, you can break iron sights, but if they're good iron sights, it's hard. I've seen iron sights break. I've seen barrels bend in Colt M4s, like government issue Colt M4s. I've seen them literally bend. So you can break anything, but you get what I'm saying there. I will absolutely use a red dot, but if it gets left in the car and it gets really, really hot and the batteries explode, or it gets really, really cold and it's so cold that the electricity won't transmit, that's a real thing, or the batteries run out, or the glass breaks, or any number of things. And I'm not picking on red dots. I'm just saying these things happen. I still want to be able to use that weapon. Still want to be able to get fast, accurate hits on target. Maybe not as fast. But, in the Marine Corps, I joined back when we had to polish our boots and had the old woodland camo pattern. And I qualified expert in the Marine Corps. And we got hits on man-sized targets up to 500 yards with an iron-sighted, beat-up, old, I don't want to say piece of junk because it still worked, but an M16A2 that the metal parts on it may have been more silver than black, to give you any idea. And that gun was still running. If they haven't decommissioned it and shredded it, that gun's probably still running. And those iron sights are probably still working. And who knows how old that rifle was when I got it. You get the idea. So any fighting rifle, I am going to say, backup iron sights. I don't even think you need backups. If you just want to run an M4 clone with iron sights, especially at first, if you aren't familiar, if you've never shot competitions with irons, and you listen to my bio, I grew up, I cut my teeth doing that. Before I joined the Marine Corps at 17, I was already a gold medalist in shooting weapons with iron sights. By God's grace, He blessed me to do those things. But if you're not, you may want to go to, and I have no affiliation with, or have never done it, but an Appleseed shoot or something like that, and get acquainted with the beautiful skill and art of making hits with iron sights, because it's a dependable way to project force and protect those that need protecting. And it's very simple. So I think for that reason, call me a troglodyte, I want backup iron sights. Even if they're flipped down, even if they're on there, they still need to be good, usable, workable iron sights. I am a fan of backup iron sights. I want a way to aim that weapon. If I drop it and break the glass, shatter the glass, the battery goes out, it's supposed to have a great warranty or whatever, but it just loses 0, whatever the case is, right? I've seen a lot of optics go down. I want a way to use that weapon. I don't want that weapon to be useless to me. And optics have come a long way and they're very robust today. But I still think there's a place for backup iron sights. And I think you should know, as a man, as a gunfighter, how to shoot iron sights. Call me old school. So, backup iron sights, bam. There you go. So whatever fighting rifle carbine it is, backup iron sights. If you just want to have iron sights, if you just want an M4 clone or an M16A2 or something like it with just good fixed iron sights, and I think some of the best combat capable iron sights, you're not talking about the like running an M14 or an M1 Garand or something like that, are the M16A1. Now I came in after those, but I'm familiar with them. That sighting system, it's simple, it's rugged, it's lightweight. I didn't have one of those, but in law enforcement, I did run a SC.A.R 15, a military issue, fully automatic if I wanted it, and fully automatic is almost useless. So don't think you're really missing out there. Ask Marines how often they actually use full auto, or Army for that matter. But anyway, I was issued a full auto one in law enforcement. Shoot it full auto for fun, but that's really all that was really designed for. There may be a situation one day where it was relevant, but it had those sights on there, pretty much. Different sight radius, but it had those old school M16 A1 sights. Robust, rugged. I never was unconfident that thing wouldn't be zeroed or run. It was a great little carbine. It would still be a fantastic fighting carbine. And not the full auto one, because you probably can't get that one, but just a SC.A.R 15, go look up what that is. Fighting carbine. It's simple. It's very utilitarian. You could, if you're up for the task as a rifleman, that rifle will do pretty much anything you want it to do inside of 300 yards. It's phenomenal. It just has iron sights. That said, there are real advantages to good optical sights. Now, other than what I was issued in the military, and I should say was one of the early adopters before everybody got them, in Iraq, of the ACOG. And so I got to go to war twice, once with just irons and once with irons and an ACOG. Good ACOG, fixed power, very rugged, very robust. I really like that optic or something like it where it doesn't take batteries. They're definitely war proven. But I'm going to go skip ahead a little bit because this podcast is already it's just past 15 minutes and I haven't even really gotten into actually setting up a fighting rifle other than if you just want iron sights. So the first one I set up for myself, and this was before I ever heard the term Recce rifle, but I was doing one of those more specialized assignments in law enforcement. I was doing some more special stuff, by God's grace blessed. And one of the things we did, talking about being old school, there was a time, this is mostly for the younger people listening, where marijuana was a highly illegal substance in the U.S. It wasn't that long ago. And I could really care less if you want to do marijuana or not. That's not really my thing. But I was a cop, and there's these big federal task forces. And what happened was these Mexican drug cartels, gang members, gangs, whatever, instead of going through all the hassle of trying to import, however many thousands of pounds of marijuana over the border, there's some really remote places up in Northern California and throughout the West where they would just go and drop people off, and they would literally grow a crop of marijuana and then sell it in the U.S. And it was not unheard of for them to defend that with deadly force. And we would, again, I want to be too specific, there were these task forces and I was attached to them. I don't want to get into what agencies or whatever. They would have guys on helicopters, they would locate these things, they would go drop us. We would go, let's just say, make it safe, collect up this marijuana. They would lift it up and make helicopters and stuff like that. And we would dispose of it. I needed a rifle that would be good for CQB distances. I was doing urban stuff. Or if I was out there on those marijuana grows in big open country out west. And so I had never heard the term Recce rifle, but I needed a rifle to do all that. And here is how I pretty much set that up. I was also big into competition shooting during that time. And this rifle is still one of my go-to fighting rifles. It's not my go-to fighting rifle, but it's probably my second one. Now it's a piston-driven AR-15. It's got an LPVO, a simple, I'm not even going to mention the model because Leupold doesn't make it anymore, but it's a Leupold LPVO. Takes no batteries. I have 45-degree offset iron sights. If I'm really down and dirty, going fast, and just getting crazy fast hits, multiple targets, a crude sight picture with those iron sights can be crazy fast. For most stuff, I have the LPVO, and that LPVO has been on there for well over a decade. And the original worn mounts I mounted it with, the permanent worn mounts, I don't think that thing has moved. I've dropped it. I've literally beat on it with a hammer, doing some gunsmithing I probably shouldn't have been doing. That thing is rock solid. It's never lost zero. I've changed ammo and changed zero and stuff like that over the years, especially with ammo shortages and whatever, and I couldn't get my go-to ammo, but that thing is rock solid. So, LPVO. I like 1 inch. I know that 30 millimeter and 34 millimeter and who knows how big they are now is kind of the craze because the numbers on a page, but just like a vehicle or a vessel, if you put more weight higher, it's going to want to roll over. And if you're shooting dynamically, standing, kneeling, leaning around a barricade, stuff like that, the way the gun balances to me is very important. I have this big, heavy, and I've tried to use them before, kludgy 30 millimeter, 34 millimeter tube on top of my gun, and I'm leaning around something. That gun's going to want to roll over. I have to start thinking about offset and where do I aim on the target and all that stuff. And that's a lot to think about if you're getting, let's say, on the wrong end of a, let's just say, law enforcement business deal. Or whatever, however you want to phrase that, right? I like simple. I like a 1-inch tube LPVO. I like rock solid mounts. I get no kickbacks, no affiliation here, but I'm going to recommend a few mounts. DNZ. I don't even think they existed back when I put this rifle together. They are very simple and rugged. DNZ mounts. One piece if you can get it. I also really like worn mounts. They're the ones that are on that rifle. They've been on there, I don't know how long. Rock solid. Warren makes all kinds of rings, but I've used several of them. They're good rings. Tally, if you're looking for a rock solid mount that's a little bit on a budget. I'm going to tell you, I really encourage you to, if you don't know how to mount a scope, pay somebody to do that. But if you don't know how to lap the scope rings and use the little aligner tool and have a proper torque wrench, pay somebody to do that. Use both the bubbles to get it perfectly aligned up and down. But a good solid 1-inch LPVO for a fighting rifle and carbine that I'm going to shoot dynamically. Not a sniper rifle, Now, I've never been a sniper. I want to be clear about that. I was not a sniper in the Marine Corps. I am not an FBI sniper. I have done designated marksman things and roles. I'm not a sniper. But even for a designated marksman rifle, if I'm going to do any kind of thing where I want to shoot it dynamically, running and gunning literally, that's what I'm going to tell you to go with. LPVO, 1-inch tube, lightweight. So the smaller it is, the less likely you're to bang it into stuff and mess it up. But 1-inch LPVO, 45-degree offset backup iron sights. Now, if you're not familiar with shooting 45-degree offset, you might want to change that out for just flip-up backup iron sights. The reason I like the 45-degree offset is, well, it's just a technique that I like. You may choose or not choose to go with that, right? Now, another one that I got when I was the commander of a tactical team, and this probably would be my go-to rifle. If I had to pick one rifle, if I had to pick one gun, long gun, to head into the peanut butter and chocolate hitting the fan scenario, it would not be a rifle. I think you guys know that if you listen for any length of time. It would be a shotgun. Much as I love rifles and being a good rifleman, I think a shotgun is far more versatile. But on the versatility note, if I'm picking one rifle, I don't want it to be 223, 556. And I know the whole prepper sphere, survivalist sphere will hit on that and say that I'm wrong or whatever, economy of weight and all these other things. But from my experience, I want a 308. It's just a more versatile cartridge. If my threat might be a vehicle or hiding inside a vehicle or behind a door, or also I might want to hunt with it, right? And I know you can shoot deer with 223, but it's not nearly as good as a 308. I prefer 308. If I'm picking one rifle, it's 308. One of my go-to fighting rifles when I was commander of a tactical team, 308. S.C.A.R 17. I sold several weapons that I had at the time to get the S.C.A.R 17. I won one for like 10 years, and I always just kind of couldn't justify it. But if other people's lives were depending on me showing up to work and having a good and the best rifle I could get to do that job, I sold a couple of guns. I got the S.C.A.R 17. It is a phenomenal rifle. It's crazy accurate. I don't want to get too much into that, but a 308, I have it configured very similar. Now, I'm going to break my own rule here because I assume most of you are talking about AR-15s, but this one does have a 30mm. It has a Trijicon AccuPoint. But this is a much bigger rifle than an AR-15, at least than like a normal size M4 clone. It's a much bigger, heavier rifle. It's not heavy as far as 308 goes. 7.7 pounds is pretty light for a 308 battle rifle, a proper rifle. So I don't find it very unbalanced, that 30mm tube. And that said, that Trijicon AccuPoint is a very, very lightweight 30mm. It's a beautiful, beautiful optic. It is crystal clear. Talking about optics breaking, I even had one of these go bad in a pretty harsh training class where everything was just wet and nasty, and somehow water got in it and it was foggy. Even a really, really good optic like that. Now I sent it back to Trijicon. They sent me a brand new one. You know, the one I sent was far from new. They really did a good thing there. I'm very appreciative of that. But that Trijicon AccuPoint on a big rifle like that. Now the LPVO Leopold that I have, it does not take batteries. That optic does not take batteries. It runs off tritium and fiber optic, radiation and ambient light. I like that. I like simple. I like rugged. Also has backup iron sights. Now the iron sights that come on a S.C.A.R are phenomenal. I have no doubt that I could go out and run a Marine Corps rifle qual with that gun, even though it's not what the Marines carry, and get man sights out to 500 yards. Or even much further than that with iron sights. It is a phenomenally good gun. It has good backup iron sights. It's reliable. It's lightweight. That's how I have that set up. LPVO, rock solid mounts. Again, the worn mounts. It has such good experiences over so many years with the other worn mounts in my other rifle. So LPVO, Trijicon, tritium fiber optic, no batteries, backup iron sights. The other fighting rifle that I have, and I'm not a gun collector, right? This my other fighting rifle, which I don't know what's going to happen with that now because it is an AR pistol. And for years I stayed away from those because I figured surely this is not going to be a thing. And then ATF came out and said, oh, it's okay if you put it to your shoulder and all this. And I said, well, if they say it's okay, I'm going to get one and run one. So that was one of my other guns as a professional gunfighter. I ran it actually professionally, not just like a theoretical thing. So all the rifles that I've talked about, I think I've changed the lower out on one of my ARs. But even that one I think I use as a professional gunfighter. Anyway, these are guns I've actually used as a professional gunfighter, not just pontificating on a forum. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but these have real world use. This AR pistol is configured very much the same way. It has backup iron sights. Now it has that, I guess, I don't know what you call it, M16, just triangle front sight, rock solid. Doesn't move out of the way. It's there. It's the front sight post. It's rock solid. And I have a flip up, back up Magpul rear sight. I perfectly co-witness with a Hollow Sun solar powered red dot sight. I'll be honest, I got this gun and I was kind of not doing the thing that I was doing with my other rifles. Like, I don't want the best of the best. I want this rifle to be affordable, and I want to run so many rounds through it, and I want to take it to training classes and beat it up, and if it malfunctions, cool, because that's part of the training. And it'll be a short, handy little carbine, and I have used that thing for years, and that thing is awesome, and it's super reliable. It's the only DI gun that I own. I'm not a big fan of DI guns. My experience as a private contractor and in the military, they can have some issues, and they can get pretty nasty and foul up in harsh conditions. But it's the only DI gun that I own, and it's been rock solid. Also, so is that Hollow Sun. I have beat that thing riding, going off-roading, whatever it is. That optic has never lost zero. That optic red dot, I have never picked it up and not been able to see a bright, crisp red dot. And there's this big debate on true co-witness or lower 1/3. I like true co-witness because if my red dot gets knocked off, I can immediately see. I can flip up that rear sight. So I have just regular iron sights. Remember I said those backup iron sights. And I have that red dot zeroed and the iron sights zeroed. So when I look at them together, if that front sight is in the center of that rear aperture, that red dot floats right on the very tip top of that front sight. So if it does get knocked off zero, I can look and tell. And I can put it back on zero, and I should confirm it. But if something were to happen, I could put it back without firing a shot. And again, you should confirm it. But that's the beauty of that kind of co-witness system. I like that. Again, it's a fast, handy, quick carbine. And sometimes I would use that in lieu of the S.C.A.R 17, especially for like vehicle operations or something where I'd be carrying that gun for long, long hours. Because it's a lot lighter even than my lightweight S.C.A.R 17. I have them pretty much all configured the same way. That's the only one that I have a red dot on versus an LPVO because it's got a very short barrel. It's a light, handy AR. I don't know what the ATF is going to come down on that, but I'm going to call it a short AR. Whatever, rifle, pistol, carbine, PDW. Very much in that PDW configuration. It's 5.56. It's, I forget if it's 10.5 or an 11.5. I think it's 11.5 because I generally will go with the longer barrel. So it probably is that. I have no idea how many rounds I've put it through it. Been all over the country. It's rock solid. Backup iron sights, red dot. And if you want a good budget option, I would say backup iron sights and the Hollow Suns. Even though they're not American made and I like to recommend American, I kind of bought that rifle again as a beater, and I have beat up that Hollow Sun. Now I don't abuse it. I don't just take it out and whack it against a tree or something like some, one of those channels that does that. But it's gotten, I don't treat it gentle either. And I break a lot of stuff, and I haven't managed to hurt that Hollow Sun yet. So if you're looking for a good budget option, one of the M4 clones, a good all-around fighting carbine. Now, if you don't know where to start on that, I'm going to give a couple of recommendations. Smith & Wesson M&P. It's going to be my number one. Just get a complete built rifle. If you're really good at building ARs and all that stuff, then you probably know what you want anyway, and I'm not going to sit there and try and tell you. But if you just want a good, solid AR, you should still test and make sure it works, because anything, even Glocks out of the box, can have problems. Yes, it's a real thing. I've had it happen. But assuming you get out and test it, if you want a good out-of-the-box option, Smith & Wesson M&P, put a Hollow Sun red dot on it, backup iron sights if it doesn't come with them, and train with it. Go out and learn to shoot it. The other things I like for a good fighting rifle, and it's pretty much the same across the board on all of my fighting rifles. 2-point sling. A simple 2-point sling. Literally, it's got a better sling on it now, but when I used it as a professional, the way we did it, especially in an urban environment to stop active shooters, we carried it covertly in a bag. So if I was carrying it on my body for long periods of time, it was in a bag. So literally, I had a piece of Coyote Brown 550 cord that I made into a sling on that little tiny carbine, that little tiny short AR, whatever you want to call it, pistol, whatever it is. Because I just wanted to throw it on, and if I had to take it out of the bag, I was going to be holding it, and the sling was basically there so that if I got shot or something, I could throw a tourniquet on and have control of the weapon, or if I got into a wrestling match with my gun because somebody came around a corner and I wasn't paying attention, he couldn't grab it from me and shoot me with it, my own gun. But that being said, a very simple sling. A very simple 2-point sling. It's what's on all my fighting carbines. And if it's your go-to fighting long gun, I encourage you to have a white light. And there's lots of different philosophies, and somebody will tell you this is the only way to do it, but there's lots of different ways and places you can mount a white light. But some way to project white light with that fighting carbine, that fighting rifle. If it's your go-to, I'm not saying you need a $300 light for every single carbine you own, but I basically have one that I'll take off and put on whatever is my rifle that I'm using for whatever I'm doing, because I'm really only going to run one long gun at a time. So if it's a term in vogue Recce rifle, your kind of your one go-to AR, I'm going to say 16 to 20 inch, 16, 18, 20 inch AR. I don't care if you go Smith & Wesson M&P or Daniel Defense or PWS or Adams Arms or any of those. And don't put a bunch of extra junk on it. That's what I think you should have. If it's a Recce rifle like that, LPVO. If you want a little bit more positive identification of targets and maybe a little bit longer range or shooting smaller targets, then LPVO. If it's just a home defense carbine, you live in a really dense urban environment or something like that, or you're on a budget, just Hollow Sun or some other red dot. There's a lot of other really good red dots, but a red dot sight and backup irons. If it's, again, a fighting rifle carbine, if it's just for going out and shooting competition and stuff like that, backup iron sights, whatever, because you just go home that day. That's not a big deal. You're not dead. A 2-point sling and a white light, and keep it simple. In wrapping this up, I want to put this, you've probably heard a version of this many different ways in cliche terms. I was trying to think of a new way to put it, and I think by God's grace I'll be able to articulate it well. The rifle it means for you to project force. If you want to be good with a rifle, prayer and pulling the trigger is going to make you capable with that weapon. Pulling the trigger with your finger, not clicking buttons on Amazon or tapping your phone screen to buy stuff on Amazon or whatever Gucci tactical store. I like tactical stuff. I like guns. I have a podcast called Gunfighter Life. But the best optic is more of a liability than an asset if you haven't zeroed it with the ammo that you're going to use that's loaded in your gun. Whatever you have, get out there and run it. Dry fire with it. Be familiar with it. Get acquainted with it. Be confident in it. Be a competent gunfighter with that fighting rifle or carbine. With that, the tactical tip of the day. What if that optic does break or lose a zero, or you decide you just don't want it? It's too dusty, too snowy, too rainy. Just the glass is not as good as just iron sights. You have your backup iron sights. Now QD scope mounts have come a long way. They're pretty good. But what if you don't have those? What if you just have regular scope mounts on your gun? Most of these fighting rifles are going to have a pistol grip. You can usually get a pistol grip that has a storage container in it with a cap already on it, or get a piece of duct tape and trace around it and make a cap and put stuff in the pistol grip. Maybe put some extra earplugs or something in there so they don't rattle around, because that would be bad. If you have just regular scope mounts, a lot of times nowadays they'll take that, having one of those hex wrenches, and a lot of times they'll give you them with the scope rings, and just putting that in the pistol grip. That way if you need to take that optic off, you have that tool with you on the gun. Also, if you're running an AR, A spare extractor and one of those little cotter pins is not a bad thing to keep in that pistol grip either. That's your tactical tip of the day. Your tactical verse of the day. Because remember, David was a man after God's own heart. David was a mighty warrior. David slayed I don't know how many men and beasts. Said he killed bears and lions. And he slayed men, many, many. And he was a man after God's own heart. A warrior. A mighty warrior. And I see no contradiction there. And this verse is very much in keeping with that. Deuteronomy 20. When you go out to battle against your enemies and see horses and chariots and people more numerous than you, do not be afraid of them. For the Lord your God is with you, who brought you up from the land of Egypt. So it shall be when you are on the verge of battle, that the priest shall approach and speak to the people. And he shall say to them, Hear, O Israel, today you are on the verge of battle with your enemies. Do not let your heart faint. Do not be afraid, and do not tremble or be terrified because of them. For the Lord your God is he who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies, to save you. Something I would encourage you to do if you're listening to this and you're blessed to be a professional gunfighter and you're in charge of men, or you have the opportunity to, even if you're not in charge, before you go on a mission, on an op, kicking down doors, whatever the case is, that and many other verses might be a good thing to gather the men around and read for them and pray. With that, men, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.